Welcome to the Free Library of Philadelphia. My name is Laura Kovacs, and I'm honored to introduce our guests this evening. Ambassador Susan Rice has been at the forefront of some of the 21st century's most consequential international challenges. As U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations from 2009 to 2013, and President Obama's National Security Advisor from 2013 to 2017. Ahead of the publication of her memoir, Tough Love, My Story of the Things Worth Fighting For, she wrote on Shondaland that she left government sure of one thing. It was time to tell her own story in her own words. Detailing her distinguished but at times struggling family history, education, and early career to her becoming a champion of American interests on the world stage, Tough Love is a personal story and a larger entreaty to bridge the domestic divides that threaten our global moral credibility. Walter Isaacson writes that this book will not only inspire you about the true sources of America's greatness, it will also provide some lessons in empowerment, tenacity, and fearlessness. Tonight, she'll be joined in conversations with Tamala Edwards, anchor of 6 ABC Action News Morning Edition. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tamala Edwards and Ambassador Susan Rice.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. It is always a joy and a pleasure to be here at the Free Library. And I was joking with Susan that she's written this book, 481 pages, and she goes into these interviews. Sorry. And there's a theme. Everybody says, I'll talk about the book, but first the headlines. Which I do feel as though we do have to do a little bit of that tonight. In the book, over and over, you show the amount of work, the amount of paper that the president reads, the amount of effort that you... I know, so funny. You could have just sent him a tweet and been done. The amount of effort, the amount of bravery, the amount of intuition that it takes when you're running the government, and we find ourselves in this moment. And so I wanted to go through a couple of the headlines. You know, obviously we've all been seeing what's going on in Syria with the Kurds. And what I wanted to know, number one, there are two questions on this, is when you saw the news, what hit you and how did you process it?
Well, first of all, thanks so much for doing this. I really am glad to be with you. And good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out. It's really great to be in Philadelphia. And I'm excited because I know, among others, there's some real good friends and colleagues in the crowd. How did I feel? Well, honestly, I kind of did what I am doing almost 6 out of 7 days a week, which is kind of a face plant. You know, just like... And then a few curse words. And I'm almost speechless. This thing with the Kurds in Syria is so serious on multiple levels, but just two of importance to highlight. One, these people fought and died for us to fight ISIS. They did it because after the Iraq War, after Afghanistan, President Obama, who began this partnership, understood that there is a smarter, more economical, more efficient way to fight terrorism. We don't always have to put tens of thousands of U.S. ground forces into combat in order to deal with the threat. We can work with local partners when we train them, when we equip them, when we enable them with air power and the like. And so in Syria, we ended up containing ISIS with hundreds of U.S. troops serving in an advisory capacity. Very, very few U.S. casualties. And the Kurds, over 11,000 of them, gave their lives. And they did it because they believed in the United States. They took our word that we were their partners, that we would back them up, and that we would not leave them to the wolves, being the Turks. And we've abandoned them because the president woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Or something. I say that flippantly, but I'm really interested to figure out what was the underlying transaction, because Trump didn't do this for free. So then, so we've sold out our key allies, and we've signaled to the rest of the world, allies and partners, that they can't count on us. If they sacrifice with us on our behalf, for example, the Canadians, who lost more people per capita in Afghanistan than we did by a large margin, why would any of these countries trust that we will honor what is a partnership going forward? So I really worry that one of the direct consequences of this is the next time we need to fight terrorists, we have to do it ourselves, because no partners in their right mind will, be punked again. And secondly, that in other contexts, our allies will be uncertain. And then the second problem is ISIS is going to take advantage of this opportunity to come back. We had a boot on their neck, and we've taken it off. And we had 10,000 or more ISIS prisoners locked down in detention, guarded by the Kurds, who now have to defend themselves. So they're not actually going to be that worried about the ISIS fighters.
Where do they go?
They can go anywhere. They can go back to Europe, where many of them are from. They can go to the United States. They can, these are multinational terrorists. And so we're not going to be safe in the region or beyond.
And when the president says they're going back to Europe, that's their problem, nonchalantly.
That's when I just I almost want to cry. Because that's the President of the United States telling our European allies to go to hell. And by the way, there are lots of Americans who live in Europe. So it's not just,
You
Europeans
said something
to go to hell if he wants to be all about,
You
America
just said
first.
something interesting. You said he didn't do it for free. Do you think it's transaction or distraction?
No, I think it's transaction of some sort. And obviously I don't know. But we've learned so much just in the last 2 weeks. We learned that there's a deal that he tried to cut with Ukraine, or an extortion he tried to effect with Ukraine, right? We know that he called upon China to manufacture some fake dirt on Biden and juxtapose that call publicly with a prior sentence about the trade war. The Chinese aren't stupid. They understand that there's an implication there. Now, by the way, I've lost track of the news today. Before we came in here, it seems like every 15 minutes some new crazy story is breaking. But it seems like now there was this man named Mike Pillsbury, who's an expert on China and a sort of informal envoy for Trump, whom I know, who told the Financial Times that he went to China and sought dirt on behalf of the administration on Hunter Biden. And then he retracted that. So what do we think? So if all that can happen, it strains credulity that the President of the United States would, without consulting his national security team, without consulting our allies, without worrying about the military ramifications, would make such a decision just on a whim.
In the book, when you are an essay, you talk about the level of work that goes in when the president makes a call to a foreign leader, that you meet with others, you go in, you have your regular seat on the couch, you are there as this call goes through. So when you read the transcript of the call and heard somebody say, this was perfect, nothing different, you are in a different situation than the rest of us who go, really? What did you say?
I said, this is not right. That's the polite translation. First of all, what's supposed to happen before a presidential phone call is that the NSC staff coordinates and drafts background and talking points, puts together a detailed memo for the President of the United States, which the President of the United States is supposed to read. And if...
Do you think he's read any of it?
No. I'm just telling you how it's supposed to work,
okay?
And by the way, one of the important things that I want to do with this book, apart from telling my personal story, is remind the American people how it's supposed to work, so we don't lose sight of what is normal. Because if we get confused about that, it's going to be very hard to insist that we go back to normal. And normal is not the Obama administration. Normal is every prior presidential administration of both parties that have utilized the national security decision-making process. So the president gets a memo. He reads the memo. If he doesn't like the talking points, he talks to his staff and they revise them and they give him a script that he doesn't have to follow like a slave, but is basically, the message that he agrees he wants to convey. You can tell by reading that transcript that either there was no memo, which I doubt, I bet there was, more likely that he completely disregarded it. And he made those talking points up on his own. That was nothing that any professional staffer would prepare. And then in terms of how it was transcribed, and there's bizarre ellipses in there, which stood out to me, quite frankly, because the ellipses were not the foreign leader, right, where somebody got a garble or lost in translation. And by the way, when that happens, the text usually says inaudible. That was the president, whose English I think most of the people on the phone call could understand, who all of a sudden in some key places missing some words. So that was another bizarre thing. Then we get into how the transcript was processed, stored, none of it smells or looks right. That's the short summary.
So there's a fight now over Whistleblower 1 and Whistleblower 2. At length in the book, you go through the kinds of people who come into government service, foreign service, intelligence officers. What does it take for somebody to get to this point that they go to the inspector general? Like, this is not just, I had nothing to do on Tuesday, so I thought I might go talk to him.
It's an extremely risky thing to have to do, even when you don't experience a kind of crazy that is happening now. Whistleblowers put their careers at proximate risk. So for them to make that decision, they really have to feel that something is truly amiss. And in this case, the presumption might be that because Trump is threatening the whistleblower and those who talk to the whistleblower as a spy, as a traitor, with all sorts of implications that they might come after him or her. My suspicion is actually that we're going to get more of this. That people, first of all, there are loyal, patriotic, dedicated civil servants throughout the U.S. government who have been crapped on for 3 years, and they can't be happy. And secondly, I think that in some ways, as this dam, endures more and more pressure, people are going to feel obliged to share what they know and see that it actually could potentially be impactful. So I think actually we're going to see more information come to the fore.
You tell a number of interesting anecdotes in the book, and one of the ones that really stood out to me was about your meetings with Michael Flynn. You have to chase him around to come see all the paperwork that you would like to share with him since you're transitioning the government. You say he spends only about 12 hours with you.
Only, which is
nothing for the job.
Finish your question, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
And when he does show up, it's almost like people speaking two different languages. You're talking, and he's saying some things back to you, and you're like, really? His idea on the Russians, on the Chinese, on the Europeans.
Okay, so let me set the stage here. We're on President Obama's final foreign trip in November of 2016. So it's after the election. We are going from Greece to Germany to Lima, Peru. And we get to Germany, and Trump announces that Jeff Sessions is going to be his attorney general, which is kind of like, especially for us, that's scary.
His middle name is Beauregard.
I was like, okay. And then he says, and Michael Flynn is going to be his national security advisor, which is now in the public domain, so I'm not, broaching a confidence. President Obama warned Donald Trump not to make Michael Flynn his national security advisor. So we get back from the trip, and the first thing I do is pick up the phone and call my successor designate and congratulate him and say that I am at his disposal. Will drop everything. I will meet with him as long and as much as he wants between now and Inauguration Day, because there is a tradition in the U.S. government that you do your best to effect a responsible handoff, particularly in national security, to your successors. And President Obama was adamant. He had been he was so grateful that George W. Bush had done that for him in spades, that our mandate was to exceed that very high bar that the Bush administration had set. So we had hundreds of briefing papers prepared. I read every single one of them, edited them personally, made sure that they contained what I thought my successor would need to hit the ground running. And I kept trying to invite him to come to meet. And he always had something else to do, like meet with some visiting foreign dignitary. I'm not joking. I mean, it was really weird. Everybody was coming through Trump Tower. And so finally, maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, we have our first meeting. And we have 4 subsequent meetings for a total of 12 hours. By the way, if that sounds short to you, that was the only national security transition communication that happened. Tillerson, Mattis, all these guys were under instructions not to meet with Kerry, Carter, their successors. There was no other discussion beside the one that Flynn and I had. And it was surreal because, this was the locker up guy, right? And he really was actually quite subdued in our discussions, almost daunted by the job ahead. And me and my team, we had a betting pool on. I'm not going to say it in the book, so about whether or not he would make it to Inauguration Day, and I lost 24 days on the over/under. I didn't bet. I was betting he wasn't going to make it. And the communications were just weird with him. I mean, he was nice and respectful. He was absolutely not interested in any policy perspectives I might share. He was interested in the process. How do you do the job? How do you talk to the president? Blah, blah, blah. I was like, I don't know how you talk to your guy. But here's how I talk to mine, And it all ended. I'll leave. There's some more details for you to find in the book. But it all ended in our last meeting when I reached out my hand to shake his and to wish him well. And he said to me, "Can I have a hug?" I was like, okay. There's a lot of hugging in this book that I wasn't expecting. So yeah, I gave him a hug and I wish him well, and that was the last I saw of him, except on TV.
Well, but didn't you enjoy the part where he asked you if it could be split shift? Like he could just come
that
in the
was
morning?
his deputy. Oh, gosh. Yes. Okay. So his deputy designate was this very fashionable woman named Katie McFarland, who had been a Fox News personality and had served previously. The deputy national security advisor, by the way, is the toughest job in government if it's done properly. And this person had been a Fox News personality, and her previous role in government was back in the Reagan administration, where she got coffee for the national security. I'm not being sexist. I'm telling you the truth. So this woman who joins our meeting at one point says to me and my deputy, who actually was the hardest working person I ever knew, do you think we could split the job so that Mike works the morning shift and I work in the afternoon? I'm not, this is just straight up. And we looked at each other and we're like, we don't think so. Don't think that's going to work. These are actually really, really, really hard jobs. You will both be here if you're doing your jobs right into the wee hours. And then my other favorite thing about her, she was actually a really nice person, not the brightest bulb in the chandelier. But she came to one of our meetings wearing a full-length mink coat and walked into the Situation Room wearing a full-length mink coat. And I said, I don't think there's ever been a coat like that in the Situation Room. And she said, oh, sure there was, certainly during the Reagan administration. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't see Jean Kirkpatrick in a full-length mink coat.
Black jacket, yes. Mink coat, not so much.
It was so weird. The whole thing was so weird.
So I promised Susan after a few headlines we would talk about the stories in the
Okay,
book. So
all right.
let's do some of that. You talk about your childhood, and you are unsparing about some painful parts of it. Your parents, when they get together, it's clear that you love them both dearly, and you have great relationships with them as adults. But as a child, as the marriage is coming apart, it is really torturous for you and your brother. And not only that, the divorce is long and difficult. I hope you don't think it's facetious to say it made Kramer and Kramer look mild in some parts. It was tough. But what I found interesting is that your functionality, to say that you function at a high level is undercutting it. She went to the National Cathedral School and essentially walked out with all the top honors and had the teachers impressed, the students impressed. You had a sports career, and you talk about the fact that it was compartmentalized. You were doing this on one level while going home to this. As I read it, I thought, I'd be in a ball, or I would have gotten into so much trouble. I would have made poor choices. How do you think at such a young age you managed to do that and not completely skid off the path?
I struggle with that question because I don't know that I ever knew any alternative. My parents, as Tam said, were wonderful, brilliant, accomplished people who loved me and my brother fiercely, but they had no business being married. And by the time I was 7, they were fighting every night, at extremely high decibels and really nasty stuff and throwing stuff, and it was scary. It was scary for me because I could never really tell how far it might escalate. And so I'd be in bed trying to fall asleep, and the screaming would get so intense that I'd come downstairs. My little brother, hopefully was asleep, and I'd sort of wait outside the door spying to try to figure out, how bad is this really? And if I thought I had to intervene to keep things from going off the rails, that's what I'd do. And sometimes that intervention required, reminding them that we were there and that, what they were doing and saying had an impact. Sometimes it was actually hearing them out and trying to mediate between them. And in that process, I learned much more than any 7 or 9-year-old wants to know about the origins of their parents' breakup, which included an affair and included private detectives and eavesdropping, stuff, equipment. It was just nuts. And I realized that, one, I had a choice, in a sense, and at least that's how it seemed to me, that, it affected me. I was grumpy with my friends. I was short. They were, I could tell that I was losing connection with them, and they gave me some tough love about how I needed to shape up. It wasn't that it didn't have a consequence. It, many years later, caused me to be very uncertain about my ability to marry and make a sustained commitment. I got cold feet before our wedding. Fortunately not at the altar, but a few months earlier. And we've been married for 27 years, so far so good. But what I realized was, I'm either going to let this crush me or I'm not. And I realized that, I can't control my parents in every respect, or in any respect perhaps, but I can control what I do. Do I try my best at school? Do I try to repair my friendships? Do I try to do what my parents had taught me to do, which was my best in what I set out to do? And I made that determination. My parents obviously supported me in that. But it was sort of a binary choice. That you either get knocked down and stay down, or you get back up. And I guess in other parts of my life at different times, having been knocked down, I don't know how to make that choice differently. And so what I got out of that experience was, one, some confidence that I could take a blow and keep going. That was really, it gave me strength in a way going forward. And I learned that, I learned some mediation skills that I didn't know I'd need in the future. But it was this sort of searing, formative experience of my life before becoming an adult.
In the book, you talk about race in various ways. On your mother's side, you're descended from Jamaican immigrants who come with next to nothing and make a life for their children. On your father's side, it's from South Carolina, Southern blacks, a lot of ministers, and he says, I don't want to do that. But they give you an interesting directive, which is your job is to be the best and let other people hold all that. We're not doing that. In high school, you have an interesting moment. You played basketball. You get a new coach. It's going well.
Love my coach.
Loved your coach.
Love my coach.
You guys are standing there, and apropos of nothing in the book, she just turns and looks at you and says, nigger.
And I responded, can I say this?
Go right ahead.
I said, fuck you. And I've never cussed out a teacher before or since. No teacher's ever called me nigger before or since. And we stayed close. She was a wonderful person, is a wonderful person. That came from somewhere inside of her background that as soon as it came out of her mouth, she knew she made a mistake. And it didn't come, strangely enough, I knew at the moment it didn't come from a position of malice. But I also knew it couldn't go unanswered. And I needed to shock her back the way she shocked me and make it plain that, that was not
Gonna happen.
not something we could tolerate.
You were a teenager at this point.
14, 15, yeah.
In a lot of books, that would have been the point that somebody has a bit of a collapse. They're crying, they go home, it changes their worldview. I think you spent half a page, maybe, and you move on. Why do you think you were able to be like, girl, that's you, and I'm not holding this?
Well, I mean, I really believe that I somehow internalized early on, for better or for worse, the mantra that my father taught me, which is don't take crap off of anybody. He said it over and over. And it came, in his experience, from a very real place where, he'd grown up in the segregated South in the height of Jim Crow. And he served in World War II at Tuskegee with the Airmen. And instead of being proud of being a part of the Tuskegee Airmen, he was bitterly resentful of the notion that he was meant to serve and, if necessary, fight in a segregated army on behalf of, or Air Force, on behalf of the freedom of everybody but his own people. And he never got over that. And he also resented mightily the notion that black people had to prove to white people that they could fly airplanes, as if that was a novel concept, which back then it was, but he thought it was absolutely ridiculous and self-evident. Black people are human beings as capable as anybody else, and it's not his job or my job to prove otherwise to people. And so this whole notion that don't take crap was really teaching me and my brother we had to believe in ourselves. We had to know who we were. And if other people are trying to diss us or disrespect or diminish us or denigrate us, don't let it happen. Don't let them get away with it, because what he taught us was that prejudice, bigotry, is the product of another person's insecurity. And if you let it be the source of your own insecurity, it's hugely debilitating. So he tried to teach us this, what I call psychological jujitsu. And he actually says, and I quote him in the book, he came to a realization at some point, probably in his 30s or 40s, that if my being black is going to be a problem, it's not going to be a problem for me. It's going to be somebody else's problem. And so, in so many ways, that lesson from him and many like them from my mother sort of taught me that, I'm not going to let this woman, even when she didn't really actually mean to hurt me, get in my head.
You did something interesting even in this conversation. You immediately said, but she was a really good person. She goes on to write you a letter when you're having a hard time. For a lot of people, that event would have been period, end of sentence. For you, it's a comma. We live in a moment now where there is no broadness. There is no possibility. That is it. What do you think the lesson was, your ability, even in that moment, to see her beyond just that moment?
Because I knew her before and beyond that moment already. And I also, we all screw up. I've screwed up. I've said things I regret. Lord, I talk about it in the book. I said some things to my mother when I was a teenager that if my daughter said to me today,
She'd be toothless.
she'd be toothless, yes. You know, none of us are saints. And one of the things I try to do in this book is be honest with myself and honest with the reader with the benefit of some little bit of age and wisdom and hindsight. You know, where did I screw up? Where did I do right? What did I learn from both those experiences? And so, you know, I'm not a super patient person. There's people who know me.
Really?
Really. But I'm not unforgiving. I'm not overly forgiving. There's some people get theirs in here. But they're few, and I was judicious in deciding who they were.
Let's talk about the black vote.
By the way, you notice I don't name my coach
You don't.
because I want to protect her.
You and I both went to Stanford, and you talk about your college experience. You talk about your high school experience. Most of your friends were white. You get to Stanford. You do what you want to do. You meet your husband the first week of school.
That was
And
not the plan. I
it wasn't,
trying,
but-
I was coming from an all-girls school, and here I am in this, target-rich co-ed environment. I was not trying to meet my husband the first week of school.
But you got a good one.
I did get a good one.
You know, when I went, I felt a bit of a pull. I wanted to do my own thing. I didn't want anybody telling me what I had to do. I wanted to go to Ujamaa but not live in Ujamaa. And I always,
Tell them what Ujamaa is.
Ujamaa is the black house at Stanford. And I think as an African-American student, I felt that pull between what are you supposed to do and sometimes what do you want to do. You never seem to tussle with that. You talk about group comm a little bit, a class where people talk about their feelings.
Did you know that class?
I missed out. I'm the only person in the world who didn't do group comm.
It was the best class. It was a class where, first of all, there were no papers, there's no homework. It was literally a group of individuals, maybe 30 at a time, who came from all kinds of diverse backgrounds, who spoke openly and honestly about their identities and their backgrounds and the issues they were wrestling with. So, you had, Alaskan natives talking to, kids who come out of the barrio in LA, talking to, people from Harlem, talking to people, from very comfortable backgrounds about all these issues. And I learned more in that class about myself and about other people than probably any other class at Stanford.
Did you ever feel a pressure of, I have to do blackness this way? Or you didn't even think about it?
Well, no, I did think about it because, as I say in the book, I, having grown up in a very white environment and gone to, elite school, an elite girls' school in Washington, and having had parents who had made their own peace in their own ways with their histories and backgrounds and experiences, but they were emphatically non-joiners. So, we kept asking my parents growing up, why couldn't we go to Jack and Jill? Black people know what Jack and Jill is. It's a sort of, as my parents would say, I don't want to offend anybody, I'll be nice. It's a upper middle class, social collective of African Americans in various large cities. My parents would say when we asked them that question, we may be upper middle class blacks, but we're not going to be bougie blacks. That's kind of inside baseball. Anyway, what it meant was, when I got to Stanford, it really was in many ways my first opportunity socially, not intellectually, not in terms of my knowledge, my comfort level with our history and our experience, but socially to spend a lot of time, if to the extent I wanted to, with other black students. And I did, and it was part of a growth experience that was important and valuable. But I wrestled with, I was uncomfortable because I felt like I had better language than this in the book, but I felt like I was more black on the inside than I knew how to be on the outside. I was kind of the opposite of an Oreo.
And she's right, in the book, she does expertly explain that. But that would be an interesting cookie now, wouldn't it? You go on, a lot has been made out of your blunt, upfront, here's how it is style. I love the anecdote when Richard Holbrooke thinks he's going to get the best of you, and instead he gets the finger in the middle of a meeting. And
See,
it worked.
I graduated from using my words.
You don't shy away with warlords from making yourself known, but you also talk about the cost of this. When you're at the State Department, a colleague takes you out for what you say was middling Chinese food and delivers a tough message, which is your colleagues are having a hard time with you and it's about to cost you. When you are going through troubles in the nomination for Secretary of State, in the aftermath, you talk to your brother and you say, what did I do wrong? He gives you 4 things, and the last one is, you didn't build a network. At both these moments, you are chastened and you say, I've got to figure something out. What did you do? Like, what did you actually do to turn those moments around?
Well, the first moment she's describing is early in my tenure as the Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs. This is in President Clinton's second term. And I'm 32 years old, and I've got this big job. And I'm a breastfeeding mother of a brand new baby. And most of the senior people who reported to me were 20 to 30 years my senior, in the predominantly white male, pinstripe State Department. And I was hard charging, and I knew, I was a political appointee. We had only but so much time to get stuff done. We knew what we wanted to get done. I had the backing of the president and the secretary, and I was just going. And my first year, all kinds of crises occurred simultaneously. War in the Congo, war between Ethiopia and Eritrea, the embassy bombings of 1998, et cetera. And, the more stuff that crashed down on us, the more determined I was that we had to get stuff done and push forward. It was kind of, the only way I knew to cope was just to keep driving. But that was not a leadership style that was well suited to the State Department, and particularly not coming from somebody like me. And so this extremely wonderful man named Howard Wolpe, who was a former congressman from Michigan, but was then serving as a special envoy for President Clinton for Central Africa, took me out to lunch, and he said, look, I really want you to succeed. I see your talent, I see your capacity, but you're going to really blow this if you don't slow down, be more patient, be more respectful, build, consensus, take your time. And, it was kind of like a gut punch over sweet and sour. But I knew that it was, as my dad always used to say to me when he would give me tough love, listen to me because this comes from somebody who has your best interests at heart. And that's the spirit in which I took it, even as I realized that this was a pretty heavy dose. And it came shortly before the Christmas holidays, and I took the time over the holidays to really reflect on what he said, and he was right. He was right. And so I tried really hard, coming back in the new year with sort of 2.5 years, 2 years, I guess, left of my tenure, to make those adjustments. And, obviously not perfectly, but I think I did it substantially, and I think by the end of my tenure, I had managed to get a lot done with a team that felt that they owned the progress with me. And I think I learned a whole lot in that experience at an early age about leading teams and managing people. So I'm forever grateful to him for doing that for me, and I've tried to do the same for young people when I see the potential in them, but also the challenges. After Benghazi, when my brother was giving me his, by the way, my younger brother is giving me his wisdom, and he really is wise. He did say to me, among other things, you know, you need to build a network of people who will be there for you when you need them, and you need to learn how to ask people for help. I had a network of people that I had grown organically over the years, but I'd never been deliberate about outreach. And I still, to this day, although I'm trying to get better at it, I'm not good at asking people for help. And he was basically saying, you know, you've got to do both. It's not good enough to be good. This was his fun. You cannot, merit alone is not enough. All your life, Susan, you know, you've gotten over by being meritorious. And that's good, it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. You need rabbis, you need people who will help you and support you, and you need to cultivate them before the stuff hits the fan.
When you go to be confirmed to be an assistant secretary of state, you have a 6-week-old baby. He's all but on the table with you as you're sitting in front of the committee. When you leave that job, he's almost 4, and he says to you, I hated that job. You're gone all the time, and you're like glad he didn't tell you the week before. You have a few years out, then you go back to work for Obama. You're leaving on Monday, coming back later, and in the book you'll say, my husband picked up a lot. I was gone for this, I was gone for that, but I was fascinated by this. You do not belabor it. You do not talk about it as a burden. You do not talk about regrets. This is not Anne-Marie Slaughter. You still can't have it all. I think in so many memoirs written by powerful women, we've come to see the, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, what did I not do? You don't do that. And I thought that was a fascinating choice. I'm not going there. I did what I did, and it's okay.
But it's okay because I think my family has made me feel it was okay. So, and I tried really hard. I mean, when I was now we're in the Obama years. I'm a more grown-up person, 2 young kids at home, and 2 parents who became very ill and ultimately died over the course of the Obama years, that I was committed to caring for in a very hands-on way. And I went out of my way. I was not going to miss the parent-teacher conferences. I was not going to miss the doctor's appointments. I was not going to miss back-to-school night. I was not going to miss the game that was most important to, you know, my daughter, the soccer player. I couldn't be at every game, but if this was the one that really mattered, I would do my damnedest to be there. And I tried to lead my teams that way and give them the same support and permission to do what they needed to do for their families. And you know, this was enabled, frankly, by a president who was himself the father of young kids and who understood that none of us are going to give our best performance if we don't feel we're valued as human beings and that we can be there by the bedside of a sick parent, you know, or with a kid who needs you there. And so I feel like, particularly with my parents, I didn't cut corners. Like, I was there when I needed to be there. So I feel good about that. And I think with the kids, for the most part, the same is true, although, you know, God knows not everything. And, you know, they turn out the way they turn out, and we may get there. But, you know, I don't know. And the other thing is, they were so supportive of me. They were proud of what I was doing. They understood its importance. And my son in particular spent days and hours at the UN just absorbing all these meetings, sitting in the most boring, you know, turgid multilateral sessions with, you know, everybody from Zambia to Palau giving long speeches. And he just relished it. So they got something out of this experience, and they understood the importance of what I was doing, and they were participants in it. So it wasn't as binary as it could have been. And yes, do I regret that for 4.5 years I was away from my family 4 to 5 days a week? Of course I do. And then when I came back, I was sleeping under the same roof, but I didn't see them anymore. But I think they understood and supported and believed in the importance of it, and that helped a lot.
I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll get to some of the audience questions. As we're getting into the 2016 election, I know,
2016, okay.
yeah.
I thought you were going to 2020. All
We
right,
will
we're
be
good.
eventually, because that's where the question ends up.
Okay.
You say, I think Donald Trump, something could happen here. And the people laugh you off. No, no, no. And you say, okay, I do foreign policy. You guys are the political experts. You turn out to be right. So would you like to share your spidey sense of how the next year goes and where this all ends up?
Spidey sense. I will, but please not, I'm not a political how do you say it?
Prognosticator.
Prognosticator, or a political expert. But I believe that we're going to see positive change in 2020. I really do. Can I say something else that's not
Sure.
polite? This shit is too cray. And I don't think it's going to endure.
Have you had a particular moment? For me, where I knew it was a different kind of place, was I and my unmatched genius. I was like, okay, my dude, this is just...
It was better than that. In my what was it? It was a great quote.
Does anybody remember the exact tweet? Am I unmatched in something else? Yeah.
Unmatched in it. So anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. In all that.
I was like, this is an 11-year-old playing Dungeons and Dragons, and is like, guys, I gotcha.
Okay. It will only be okay though if we make it so. So that's on all of us.
All right. So I think at this point I'm going to get some cards where you all have written some questions. If you were Secretary of State in January 2021, what would be the first thing you would do, and the second?
I would be all about restoring our partnerships and alliances.
What advice would you give to a female grad student who wants to pursue a career in security? If you were back to your 20 or 30 years old, what would you have liked to know before jumping into politics, security, diplomacy?
I would say just do it. Believe that you can, and don't be intimidated. It's not as much of a male field as it used to be, and even when it was, you can kick ass.
American isolationism has a history of promoting global conflict led by authoritarian regimes. We're beginning to see this occur once again with emboldened behavior from China, Russia, Iran, Turkey, etc. What efforts can our nation pursue in order to strengthen our multilateral institutions while an isolationist sits in the Oval Office? Somebody's in grad school.
I've actually, and I'm not being flip, I've come to the conclusion that we actually don't have simply an isolationist in the White House. We have somebody who's not running an America first foreign policy, as problematic as that is. It's actually a me first foreign policy. And that's even more complicated. So we got to get rid of the me. And then we can talk about how we reinvest in our partnerships, alliances, and multilateral institutions, because the nature of the problems we face now are not ones that any one country can resolve on their own.
As a young woman, how can I fight all the stereotypes that the men are better than us?
Who told you that? That is just not even right. And that's where you have to start. You are as good as you believe you are. And the only person that can convince you otherwise is yourself. So don't let it.
As Emmett would say, don't take any crap off of
Don't
anybody.
take any crap.
I'm actually going to end quickly on a last question because you come to this in the last section of the book. You talk about your son, Jake, and you all have
This is
very...
the infant,
Yes,
the
who grew up.
breastfeeding child.
And I say that you're going through an Alex P. Keaton moment. And that
I hope it's a moment.
he has very, very different views. He's a very active Republican. He's making Stanford great again recently. And you say that you are pained and you worry that what if you guys have a break that can't be reproached, and you hope it doesn't get there.
But I also say we're not going to let it get there.
And I wanted to end on that hopeful note.
So I've got two wonderful children that I love as much as any mother can love a child. Our son Jake, who's 22, senior in college, is quite conservative. Our daughter is quite progressive. And we have some robust dinner table conversations. Sometimes robust would be the understatement. But we are a really close family. And I know my son would walk on coals for me, and I would do it for him. And one of the things I've learned from this experience, apart from, somebody fed him some funky stuff when I was in New York. Just kidding. Is that, because we're dealing in our dinner table with a microcosm of the challenges we face as a nation, I think there's some lessons. I mean, we are a family first and foremost. At the end of the day, we only have each other. We tell our kids when they start fighting with each other, what are you going to do when we're gone and you only have each other? Are you guys going to manage to be together and support each other the way me and my brother do? Or are you going to just, be alone? And none of us want that. We want that bond to endure. And we work hard at it, and sometimes we fail at it. But we're committed to it. And that's the way we have to be as a country. We have to recognize that where we disagree, where we differ, we can choose to turn away from each other and part company. But then we're going to basically sign the death sentence of our unitary democracy and forget our global leadership and forget our national security. We'll just rot from within. But because our domestic divisions are a problem of our own making, I believe therefore, by definition, they're a problem we have the capacity to fix if we have the will and the sense of urgency. And I talk about in the last chapter of the book a number of things that I think we can do from the individual level to the national level as a matter of personal practice, as a matter of what we teach our kids, but also as a matter of public policy. How we can take the kinds of steps that can begin to heal these divisions. But my son has taught me the importance of making the effort to do that. And what I'm trying to say in the closing of this book is dark as this moment may seem, many of us here are old enough to know and have studied enough history to know that in the grand sweep of the history of the United States of America, we've been through so much worse. We've been through a civil war and Reconstruction and 2 world wars and McCarthyism and Vietnam when students were being shot on campuses and the civil rights era where people like you and me were being, sicked by dogs in the streets and water hoses. And our cities were burning down. And 9/11. And we've come through each of those things eventually stronger and still together. So we can do this if we have the will and the leadership. But it's not just about our leaders, as important as that is. It's about each one of us and how we choose. I say in the book, we each have agency and responsibility. We're not bystanders. But I also say that nobody's ever won by betting against the capacity of the United States to renew itself and grow and change. And it would be really foolish to start now. So I end up, in spite of all of it, hopeful about our capacity to come through this and more. But only if people recognize the urgency and importance of the moment and and foster the will to approach it as we have approached other challenges at different stages of our history.
If you have any questions about American statecraft and policy over the last 20 years, it's in the book, and a whole lot more. So I hope you will get the book and go see Susan. Are you signing books at the end of this?
I am
or
signing books. Thank you
right.
all so much for
thank
being
you for
here.
coming out,
Really.
and thank you for
Thank
spending
you.
this time with us.
This is fun.